Did you know that one of America's most powerful Islamic leaders was once a convicted burglar who earned the nickname Satan in prison for his violent hatred of all religion? You'll never believe how Malcolm Little, a drug dealer, pimp, and thief, transformed into Malcolm X, and then El-Hajj, Malik el-Shabazz, becoming one of the most influential Muslim voices in American history. This isn't just another prison conversion story. This is about a man who went from cursing God's name to defending Islam on the world stage, and how a single letter from his siblings changed the course of civil rights forever. But what really happened in that Massachusetts prison cell will shock you to your core. Malcolm Little's journey to crime began long before he ever saw a prison cell. Growing up in Depression-era Michigan, he watched his father die under suspicious circumstances, and his mother slowly lose her mind from the trauma. By age 13, Malcolm was already showing the signs of rebellion that would define his early life. Moving to Boston as a teenager, Malcolm threw himself into the street life with a vengeance, became a numbers runner, a drug dealer, and eventually a burglar who targeted wealthy white homes. The young man who would later become one of America's most articulate speakers was then known as Detroit Red, a street hustler who lived by his wits and his willingness to take dangerous risks. But his criminal lifestyle was about to catch up with him in a way that would change everything. At just 20 years old, Malcolm Little was arrested for armed robbery and sentenced to 10 years in Massachusetts State Prison. The charges included breaking and entering, larceny, and carrying firearms. Crimes that reflected a young man completely lost in a world of violence and desperation. But it wasn't just the crimes that shocked the courtroom. It was Malcolm's defiant attitude. He showed no remorse, no fear, and no respect for authority. The judge, the lawyers, and even other criminals saw a young man consumed by rage and seemingly beyond redemption. Nobody could have predicted that this angry convict would become one of the most powerful voices for social justice in American history. But first, he had to hit rock bottom. Inside Charlestown State Prison, Malcolm Little earned a reputation that terrified even hardened criminals. His fellow inmates nicknamed him Satan because of his explosive temper and his seething hatred of everything religious. He cursed God, mocked the Bible, and attacked anyone who tried to discuss faith with violent verbal assaults. Malcolm's rage wasn't just about his circumstances. It was about everything he had experienced in his short life: the death of his father, his mother's mental breakdown, the poverty, the racism, and now imprisonment had created a young man filled with pure hatred. He was intelligent, charismatic, and completely consumed by anger. Prison officials considered him one of their most dangerous inmates, not because of physical violence, but because of his ability to influence other prisoners with his bitter philosophy. But a series of letters was about to change everything. While Malcolm was serving his sentence, something unexpected began happening. His siblings, Filbert, Hilda, Ella, and Reginald, had converted to Islam and joined the Nation of Islam. They began writing letters to their imprisoned brother, sharing the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and the Islamic faith. At first, Malcolm mocked their letters viciously. The man called Satan had no interest in religion of any kind. But his siblings were persistent, and slowly, their words began to penetrate his armor of hatred. They wrote about black pride, about spiritual strength, and about a different understanding of God that spoke directly to Malcolm's experiences of racism and oppression. Despite himself, Malcolm found himself curious about this black man's religion. That seemed to address everything he had suffered. The turning point came when Malcolm's brother Reginald visited him in prison with a strange challenge: don't eat any more pork, and don't smoke any more cigarettes. I'll show you how to get out of prison. Malcolm was intrigued despite himself. Here was something practical, something that promised real change rather than just spiritual comfort. Malcolm followed his brother's advice, giving up pork and cigarettes immediately. But more importantly, he began to listen more carefully too. What his siblings were telling him about the Nation of Islam, the teachings about white devils, about black superiority, and about Allah resonated with the anger that had consumed him for so long. For the first time since his imprisonment, Malcolm felt something other than pure rage. He felt hope. But his real transformation was just beginning. Asterisk, in 1948, Malcolm was transferred to Norfolk Prison Colony, a facility with an extensive library. In educational programs, this move would prove to be one of the most important moments in American history. At Norfolk, Malcolm discovered something that would become his lifelong passion: learning. The young man who had dropped out of school in the 8th grade suddenly became the prison's most voracious reader, devoured books on history, philosophy, and religion with an intensity that amazed his fellow inmates. But most importantly, he began studying Islamic texts and the teachings of Elijah. Muhammad, with the same criminal intelligence he had once used to plan burglaries, the transformation of Malcolm Little into Malcolm X was accelerating rapidly. Asterisk, following Nation of Islam tradition, Malcolm discarded his surname Little, viewing it as a slave name imposed by white masters. He adopted the X to represent his unknown African ancestry, becoming Malcolm X while still in prison. This wasn't just a name change, it was a complete identity transformation. Malcolm X began corresponding directly with Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam, who was himself in prison for sedition. These letters became Malcolm's graduate education in Islamic theology and black nationalism. He studied Arabic, memorized Quranic verses, and developed the speaking skills that would later make him famous. By 1950, even prison officials noticed the dramatic change in the man they had once considered their most dangerous inmate. Asterisk, at Norfolk, Malcolm X joined the prison debate team, where his natural intelligence and newfound knowledge made him a formidable opponent. He argued against Harvard University students, against visiting scholars, and against anyone willing to engage with prison inmates. These debates sharpened his thinking and gave him confidence in his ability to articulate complex ideas. But Malcolm's real education was happening in his cell, where he spent countless hours reading everything he could find about African history, Islamic civilization, and the history of slavery. He discovered that his anger had a historical context, that his suffering was part of a larger pattern of oppression. This knowledge didn't diminish his rage, it focused it into something powerful and purposeful. His release from prison was approaching, and the world had no idea what was coming. August 1952. After serving 6 years of his 10-year sentence, Malcolm X was released on parole. His first stop wasn't a bar, a party, or even his family's home. It was a Nation of Islam temple in Detroit. The man who had entered prison as a small-time criminal emerged as a committed Muslim with a mission to transform American society. Within months of his release, Malcolm X was appointed as a minister in the Nation of Islam. His combination of street credibility, intellectual brilliance, and charismatic speaking ability made him the organization's most effective recruiter. He established new temples, attracted thousands of converts, and became Elijah Muhammad's most trusted disciple. The former criminal was becoming a leader, but his greatest transformation was still ahead. Asterisk, throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, Malcolm X became the most visible and controversial spokesman for the Nation of Islam. His message was radical, uncompromising, and deeply threatening to white America. Black people should separate from whites, defend themselves by any means necessary, and embrace their African heritage through Islam. Malcolm's speeches drew massive crowds and generated enormous media attention. He debated civil rights leaders, challenged white liberals, and articulated a vision of black pride that went far beyond integration. His intelligence, his eloquence, and his refusal to apologize for his beliefs made him one of the most feared and respected black leaders in America. But his understanding of Islam was about to undergo a revolutionary change. Asterisk, April 1964. After breaking with the Nation of Islam over personal and theological disagreements, Malcolm X embarked on the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. This journey would completely transform his understanding of Islam and race relations. At the holy sites, Malcolm encountered Muslims of every race and nationality: white, black, Asian, Arab, all worshiping together as equals. The experience shattered Malcolm's belief that Islam was exclusively a black religion, or that all white people were inherently evil. In letters from Mecca, he wrote about praying alongside blue-eyed, blonde-haired Muslims who welcomed him as a brother. We were truly all the same brothers, because their belief in one God had removed the white from their minds. The white from their behavior and the white from their attitude, he observed with wonder. Completing the Hajj pilgrimage earned Malcolm X the title El-Hajj, and he adopted the name Malik el-Shabazz, meaning the king of the tribe. This wasn't just another name change. It represented his evolution from the narrow nationalism of the Nation of Islam to the Universal Brotherhood of Orthodox. Sunni Islam. He subsequently embraced Sunni Islam and the civil rights movement after completing the Hajj to Mecca and became known as El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. The man who had once preached black separatism spoke about the possibility of racial harmony through genuine Islamic faith. His message became more sophisticated, more inclusive, and ironically, more threatening to those who benefited from racial division. Returning from Mecca, Malcolm X brought a transformed message to America. He still advocated for black pride and self-defense, but now he spoke about the possibility of working with sincere white allies. He criticized the Nation of Islam's racial theology while maintaining his commitment to Islamic faith and black liberation. This new Malcolm was more dangerous to the status quo than ever before. His combination of Islamic spirituality, international perspective, and pragmatic politics made him a bridge between different civil rights factions. He began organizing the Organization of Afro-American Unity, seeking to connect the American civil rights struggle with anti-colonial movements across Africa and Asia. But his enemies were not going to let this evolution continue. Malcolm's transformation from Nation of Islam minister to Orthodox Muslim leader came with a deadly cost. His former allies in the Nation of Islam viewed him as a traitor, while government authorities saw his international connections and revolutionary rhetoric as increasingly dangerous. Death threats became a daily reality. Despite the danger, Malcolm continued to speak truth to power with the same fearlessness he had shown as a criminal and as a Nation of Islam minister. He knew his life was in danger, but his commitment to Islamic principles of truth and justice wouldn't allow him to remain silent. The man who had once been called Satan was now willing to die for his faith and his people. February 21, 1965. Malcolm X was assassinated while speaking at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. He was 39 years old, with a lifetime of accomplishments compressed into just 13 years of freedom. But his death couldn't erase the extraordinary transformation he represented, from criminal to minister to international human rights leader. Malcolm X's journey from Malcolm Little to El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz remains one of the most remarkable personal transformations in American history. The man who had earned the nickname Satan for his seething hatred and cursing of God became one of America's most powerful advocates for Islamic faith and human dignity. His life proves that no one is beyond redemption, that education can overcome hatred, and that true Islamic faith has the power to transform even the most hardened hearts. The criminal who once terrorized Boston's streets became a voice for justice that still echoes around the world today. Malcolm X's conversion to Islam wasn't just a personal spiritual journey. It was a catalyst for social change that helped reshape America's understanding of race, religion, and human rights. His transformation from criminal to Islamic leader shows us that the greatest victories are not won on battlefields or in courtrooms, but in the human heart, where hatred can be transformed into love and destruction into building a better world.